I will talk about my favorite issue, I must confess. The title of my presentation is From Consumers to Citizens, and I will talk about a new way of dealing with citizens, perceiving citizens. Let's start with some interesting questions. How can we secure our standard of living? Could be one of the questions. We are doing processes with lots of people in communities, in municipalities, and a couple of years ago we were very astonished that this was the main question in one community. They were not concerned how to have an even better life, but how to preserve the standard of living we already have in the coming years. Or how can we secure a good future for our kids? Who will take care for us when we need care? How can we deal with the growing diversity in society? We know the diversity is growing. Some try to reverse this process, but some try to deal with it. How can we utilize this diversity? And how can we deal with the growing complexity? It's getting more and more complicated, and who has the overview? Who knows the answers? Who knows where we have to turn the wheels? Who will pay the debt? By the way, why are we in debt? These questions are usually not raised. We are just talking about the Greeks and the Spanish or the Italians, but where does this debt come from, and how can we deal with it? Or even more basic question: what's going wrong? This example of the Costa Cordalis is for me a very interesting metaphor of the Titanic, the whole development of our society, of our civilization. Where are we going, and what's going wrong? Is this sustainable how we are living? And who is to blame? Because usually we are very used to blame politicians and political parties, and so who is to blame for all that's going wrong? Hopefully we find somebody, and then the things will be solved, but maybe not. So these are just questions, and what you can realize if you feel into these questions, they trigger something in you. It's not that they provide answers, but what they start is that your blood circulation in this part of your body is increased. And this is sometimes very beneficial. It's beneficial to look deeper into things, and what we discovered is that when we are looking for somebody to blame, and we usually look at politicians, we easily can discover that they are somehow in a dilemma situation. And the political dilemma is that if you as a politician do what is necessary for sustainable development, it's very likely that you will not be elected again. And if you don't do what is necessary for sustainable development, your politics are not sustainable. So you have the choice. The interesting thing is, who is going to solve all these issues when we cannot expect it from the political system? And how can it be that the political system has developed in a way that it doesn't solve our big and important issues we are confronted with? And I would like to offer you some of the answers we found out, and not that I pretend they are true, but they are one point of view, and maybe it's an interesting point to start a conversation about that. And what I think is that one of the big problems we have, that citizens are treated by the political system like clients or like customers. So we try to put anything away from the public which is inconvenient And nobody tells the public inconvenient truths. Even though most of the people know we are living far beyond our means, but it's difficult to find somebody who has the courage to stand up and tell this, especially when this person wants to be re-elected. And a very interesting graph is the following. I got it from a German scientist. He did a very simplified graph of the political system, and you see the politics, the economy, expert and citizenry. And the interesting thing is that actually you don't need citizens for the system. This system works perfectly. The only disturbance is that you have to have elections every 4 or 5 years. Maybe we can get rid of that problem too. Because this works wonderfully. The only disturbance are the citizens, usually. But it's not so that this is only easygoing. There's a lot of competition between politicians. And if you think, is a parliament a place where the best solutions are looked for and found? Actually, the parliaments are battlegrounds, because the different political parties fight each other. They want to be re-elected, and it's not the question who has the best idea to develop the common good. It's always a question who has which idea. So this is also an issue, but it's not only the political arena, also with regard to the administration and how we organize institutions in general. Because what we are promoting is a type of silo thinking. We are very good in sorting out different areas of competence. There is somebody responsible for the economy, somebody else for health or for social issues or for environment. The only problem is that the challenges we are facing don't care about how we organize ourselves, our institutions, and we have lots of such cross-departmental issues. And I don't know how it is in Sweden, but in Austria we have great difficulties to cope with these cross-departmental issues, because we don't have a tradition, we don't have a culture within the institutions to work cross-departmentally. And you can imagine such a system is very, very vulnerable to lobbyism. So if there are well-organized groups, they can easily cope this system, and it's very obvious that many lobby groups write the laws and regulations themselves that are later decided in parliaments. So the situation is that some big interests dominate the political scene. And as I said before, the question is, what do we have in common? What is connecting us? What do we have? What is it what we all commonly agree on? Because the centrifugal forces in society become more and more stronger. And the question is, how do we remain capable of solving big, tricky issues? How can we find the right answers and solutions in the labyrinth of possibilities? But I don't want to depress you. This is just the first part of the presentation, and the reason why you invited me was probably to hear something about solutions I can suggest what we were working on. And yesterday we already had a meeting at Anna Karin's office, and I asked a question. I did a little quiz, and I asked if we were a small seminar of 12 people, and I asked, do you find any system in this ranking? It's obviously a ranking. So in the bottom there is Lithuania, Italy, Greece, Bulgaria, Spain, Poland, Belgium, Ireland. It goes up to France, Luxembourg, Finland, Germany, Denmark. And in the top part is UK, Austria, Sweden, Netherlands. And unfortunately, Anna Karin immediately had the right answer. I'm curious, is anybody in the room who has an idea what type of ranking could this be? To me, it seems it is a ranking of the financial crisis, how which country is best and worst, but it's something different. The interesting thing is this is the result of a study where they compared volunteering in Europe. So I must confess I don't believe in statistics very much. But anyway, it gives you an idea which countries have more volunteers and more public engagement, civil engagement, and which countries have less. And the interesting thing is that those countries with the least engaged citizens are those who have the biggest trouble in the current economic crisis. And if this makes sense, we should think about if we should strive to make consumers to citizens. We don't just need consumers and clients. What we need is more active citizenship in the future if we want to cope with all these tricky issues we are facing. So it's relatively easy to claim this. We need active, engaged, collaborative citizens. The big question is, how can we achieve this? How can we support and promote civil engagement? How can we make people step out of their comfort zone and do something for their neighborhood, for their community, for the town they are living in? I'm working on this issue since more than 20 years. I've tried out many different things. And what I can tell you is that the usual approach don't work or don't work sufficiently. We put a lot of energy into new laws and regulations. We made public pleas, told people you should engage. We did campaigns and gave subsidies and grants. We honored people with awards and decorations, but in the end, all of this was not really satisfying. And after a couple of years, here you see some of the campaigns we did. Then the Office for Future Questions was not yet founded. We were the so-called Environmental Information Service, and we worked primarily on environmental issues. And we tried to tell people, please behave environmentally friendly. Use the bus, use the bicycle, leave the car at home and stuff like that. And after a couple of years, we tried to evaluate our work because it became very modern to have indicators and benchmarks and prove the impact of your work. And we were quite encouraged when we saw that even the best campaign, after 2 or 3 years, nobody wants to listen anymore at those slogans. But the interesting thing, at exactly that time, we came across a very interesting method that is called Appreciative Inquiry. And Appreciative Inquiry is interesting because usually you focus on what is not working and then you try to fix it. But Appreciative Inquiry appreciates that what is working, and they have the point of view that they say, no organization is so bad that not something, a little bit is working. And what you can do is to look into those things that are working. And that's exactly what we did with the bicycle campaign. We looked through, we had many cooperations with municipalities, for example, with big companies, lots of projects were going on. And we looked into them, and then we found one example where we really could say this worked. And this is one thing I would like you to remember after this afternoon, or one person I would like you to remember, and his name is Oswald Hagen. And Oswald became a metaphor for a very important learning we did. Oswald was working for Wolford AG. Wolford, the women may know it. It's a famous luxury stocking manufacturer, exporting worldwide. In Bregenz they have their headquarter and a plant with 1,400 employees. And Oswald at that time was working working on environmental issues. Basically he did the recycling stuff in the company to reduce waste and save money that way. But what nobody knew is Oswald was really an enthusiastic bicycle freak, and this was his world. He spent a lot of time cycling in his spare time, and when we started the bicycle campaign, he showed up when we had a meeting of companies, and he declared that he wants to do something. And I must confess, we didn't take him very serious because he was over enthusiastic. And but we were really astonished when we could see what happened the next couple of years. He had actually not much power in his position. He had no money, but he had the heart at the right place. And he started, for example, to talk with his colleague from the procurement department, and he talked about his plans and ideas and that he doesn't have money, and his friend said, well, I have an idea, I could help you. They planned to organize a tombola, and the purpose of the tombola was they wanted to ask the employees what would have to change in order to make you come with bus and by foot and with bicycle to the company. And to make it attractive, they connected it with a tombola, so you could win a prize, but they had no money to buy prizes. So they wrote a letter, and this was probably illegal, but they did it anyway. They wrote a letter to all suppliers of Wolfurt and said, please don't send any more Christmas gifts. You could offer us some prizes, awards for our tombola. And the result is that the response was so overwhelming, they got more prizes than they had employees. And so the tombola was very attractive, people participated, and in the end they had a huge list of things that could be improved. And now Oswald invited the city planners, the transport planners, the politicians, all those people responsible for different areas into the company, and it turned out that they were really happy when they saw these lists, because they didn't have to make up the mind themselves. They just became first-hand suggestions what to change. And the result of this was that within 2 or 3 years, more than 50% of the employees came in alternative ways to the office, and this was the most successful example of a company changing the transport behavior of its employees. And what we learned out of this example is that you don't need to reach 1,400 employees. We discovered the principle of acupuncture points. What you need to find is the Oswald Hagens in the system. With them you can change easily and quickly a whole system. So we need to find the Oswald Hagens in the schools, in the neighborhoods, in the companies, everywhere. And we need to support and connect them. But there was another lesson that is in this story, another very important lesson. We started to ask ourselves, what is it that is motivating Oswald? What is empowering him? What is nurturing him? Because it turned out that what he did was not what we asked him to do. He did not follow our suggestions. He was very creative by himself. What our campaign was an excuse for him to do what he really wanted to do. So when we look deeper into that, we discovered the second principle, and that's the principle of self-organization. So it's not organized by us, things organize themselves. And I've chosen the metaphor of a roundabout to explain the principle of self-organization, because it's more tricky than you think. Sometimes you can explain difficult things if you try to put it the other way around. So I will explain what the opposite of self-organization is. And if we stay in this realm of transport and mobility, the opposite is a traffic light. That's the opposite of a roundabout. The traffic light tells you what you should do. So if it's green, you can go. If it's red, you stop, no matter what the circumstances are. So if you come to a crossing, to a traffic light that's red at 10 at night, nobody is around, what do you have to do? You have to stop. It doesn't make sense, but the light says red. So this is not very effective. Much more effective are roundabouts. That's why everywhere in the world roundabouts are now the primary choice. Here, nobody tells you what to do. You decide it yourself. And this is by far more efficient than anything else. The interesting thing is, even though it's called self-organization, it has to be organized. Because if you don't have a roundabout, self-organization cannot take place, or there is a lot of hindrance. If you have the usual crossing, it's much more difficult that the traffic can self-organize. So the question is, what does this mean for our work? And we really started thinking, what could it mean? And I would like to invite you, what does it mean for you if you wanted to support self-organization? And I want to say, without self-organization, nothing works. If you have employees and you have to tell your employees all the time what they should do, you can stop your business. No family would work without self-organization. Nothing. So, but we are not used to thinking in this way. So how can we utilize self-organization? And we started. We didn't start. We stopped the way doing campaigns and started. We write now the year 1997 to work in a complete different way. The first thing we abandoned was the term sustainable development, because we discovered nobody understands. It's a nice concept and I really appreciate it, but nobody. It's intellectual. It's not speaking to your heart. So what is speaking to our hearts? It's the issue of life quality. No matter who you are, you want to have a good life quality. You maybe want to improve your life quality or secure it. That's what everybody understands. So, because that's what we used to do, we started a new campaign. And the title of the campaign was Life Worth Living, Lebenswert Leben. And interestingly, there was a coincidence. Exactly at the same moment, a mayor showed up in our office. And his name was Peter Nussbaumer. He was from a small rural community. And if I say small, I mean really small. It's a 1,000 inhabitant community. And most local or regional developers are not even interested in such small communities because it doesn't make much sense. It's much more attractive to work in bigger regions. Peter came to our office and he was concerned because he was one of those engaged mayors who had ideas, who had fire, and he was burning to improve the life conditions in his community. But his problem was that the citizens didn't follow him. And he asked us what he should do, and we said, we don't know either. We have no idea. But maybe the problem is you. And this made Peter think. And we said, from what we learned out of the Oswald Hagen experience, you don't promote self-organization. You're everything doing yourself. The development of the community is on your shoulders. And maybe it would be better if you step back a little bit and make space so that citizens can step in. And he said, well, sounds interesting, let's give it a try. So we started something we could call a snowball effect. First we talked to the mayor, and then we asked the mayor to invite 15 randomly selected citizens, not the usual suspects, not the party colleagues and friends, but new randomly chosen people who symbolize the microcosm in the community. And we told them, if you want to secure the life quality in your community, you have to do it yourself. Nobody cares. Not in Bregenz, the state capital, not in Vienna, not in Brussels. You have to do it yourself. But if you want to do it, we will support you, we will help you. And it doesn't matter what you decide, what you mean with life quality. So this was a real revolution for all the institutions involved, because usually you have somebody who says, we support you if you do a social issue or an energy issue or a transport issue or an environmental issue. But we said, we don't care, do whatever you think is necessary. And so they said, well, that sounds interesting. What is the next step? And we said, each one of you has to bring 3 more people. So it were 45 who gathered the next time, and we told them the same stuff again. And they said, so what's the next step? And we said, usually you focus on deficits. You look what is missing, what you need, but we suspend this way of thinking for a moment. And what we would like to know is what is working. You know this appreciative inquiry stuff. What is working? What are you proud of? Who are the people and institutions in your community who are already making a contribution to life quality? And they were more than astonished when they made up a list with 200 people in a small community of 1,000. They had a list of 200 people who were important for the life quality. And so the next step they did was to organize a big party, because meanwhile rumors were spread in the community. Something is going on, they are planning something. Nobody knew exactly what it was. They talked about life quality, and so the big party was a good occasion to talk about this, the idea that the community, the citizens take over and decide themselves what they consider as life quality and how they want to improve it. And this is just a story, but the interesting thing of this story is that it happened 12 years ago. And because it happened such a long time ago, we can now see what happened afterwards. We only accompanied this municipality for 1 year, and then we left them. So this means this is a really self-organized process. And here you see the list of achievements. And it may not seem that big, but please compare it to other rural communities that you are familiar with. They have a new grocery shop in passive house quality, while other communities had to close down their grocery shops, their local supplies. Usually with 1,000 people, you don't have a grocery shop in Vorarlberg. A new physician settled down, a dentist came, a masseur, a barber. The post office did not close down, but it's still working and run by disabled people. The pub did not close down, as in many other parts of the country, but was enlarged to a very good hotel. The dairy was not closed down, but renovated. A car dealer came. I would have preferred a bicycle dealer, but it's fine. A carpenter, a cafe, and so on. So it's not that important what came, but it's a wonderful symbol of a flourishing, a living community that's alive, where something is happening. And you can imagine, even though they're so small, they won lots of national and international awards. The last one was the European Town Renewal Award. And this year will be the celebration of the next Town Renewal Award. And you have to imagine, they expect 2,000 people coming to Langeneck for this event. They themselves have 1,000, so this is quite a number of people that's coming to Langeneck. In the same philosophy, we also worked in another area. This is the Great Walser Valley. It's a region of 6 small rural communities, and the result was basically the same. Here you don't have to read it, but just to give you an idea about the awards they made in this small rural community because of this self-organized process. And meanwhile, a couple of years later, the governor came to us and said, I'm very concerned with the issue of the demographic issue. And we need to do something, and I want to promote child friendliness in our country. And he asked us to make a strategic paper. And you can imagine with this experiences in the background, we didn't want to do it in the usual way, collect some experts and write a thick paper who nobody is interested in. But we made the proposal, why don't we do it with citizens, with ordinary citizens? And interestingly, the governor agreed, and what we did was a citizens' jury. That means we invited 2,000 people. Those 2,000 were randomly selected. Again, the principle of randomness, very important. And out of those 2,000, 75 agreed that they would take 4 days off work, not paid, 4 days, 4 whole days, and write on a proposal for the government how to improve child friendliness. And then we discovered, oh, all of them were adults and we are working on child friendliness, so we needed to include also children, and we did future conferences. And at that time we became really scared, because if you work for the government, you don't have you can't fail. It's too much on stake. So, and we were not secure anymore if this would work. We doubted our own experiences. So what we did is we organized an open space with experts. So we had 3 different processes. And afterwards it turned out that this was a great idea, because now we could compare the results of these different approaches. And we discovered that what children and adults proposed was at least as qualified as what came from the expert side, with the huge difference that politically it's much easier to propagate these results that came from citizens than what is coming from experts. So a paper was published, handed over to the government, and the government declared itself responsible to write or to report each year what has been done on the proposal of the citizens. So this was under the title of Children into the Middle. A new program was launched. Everybody was happy besides us, because the citizens' jury is too expensive. It's too expensive to do it in smaller communities, and most of Austria or Vorarlberg is made up of small communities between, I would say, 2,000 and 10,000 inhabitants. So they can't do citizens' juries there. What we started is look after a more simplistic method that delivers the same quality but is easier, quicker and cheaper. And interestingly, we found something. And this is called wisdom councils, and I'm so excited about wisdom councils that I have to tell you a little bit about it. The wisdom council is not made up by dozens of people, but just by a small group of 12 to 16 people. And as you may have realized, we love to work with the principle of random selection. So we are not interested in the usual suspects that always show up and always raise the hand if you ask for people. We know from many studies that a big portion of the citizens would be willing to engage, but they are waiting to be asked. And you cannot invite them with a brochure or with a poster, but you have to contact them directly. And so we send out letters and invite them personally to a wisdom council. So you cannot offer yourself, but you are chosen to be part of a wisdom council. It's like a lottery you win. So the second big difference to the citizens' jury is that it's not 4 days but only 1.5. A Friday afternoon and a Saturday, that's much easier for most of the people to attend. And then there are two different versions. Version 1 is the traditional Wisdom Council, where the participants themselves decide what they want to talk about. So no, it's not given as given subject, but the citizens themselves say, these are the important issues we want to say something about. But it turned out the killer application of the Wisdom Council is the so-called Creative Insight Council. When you have a wicked question, a difficult project where you want to hear the opinion of the people. So this is then called not Wisdom Council but Creative Insight Council. And the interesting thing, you have to imagine, 12 people get together. They don't know each other. They are not used to work in such a way. But within 1.5 days, they have the task to come to a unanimous statement they all agree upon. It's not about a majority. Each participant has to stand behind this statement. And to make this possible, there's a certain facilitation method that's called dynamic facilitation that helps achieve this. And usually, almost in all Wisdom Councils we did, people are really excited. We discovered this is something you usually don't have the opportunity. We discovered most of the people would like to engage politically in their area where they're living, but they don't want to do it within political parties. They are sucked up with politics in the traditional way, but they would love to do something for their community, but they don't see opportunities. And this is one of the opportunities that can be offered. After they found their statement, they present it publicly. And what we always do is a setting like this in a World Cafe setting, because the ordinary people don't like to stand up in a room that is in a cinema seated style. They don't have the courage to stand up and say something in front of 200 people, but they have the courage to talk on the table. So this is a very, very important part to organize it as a World Cafe. And to make it more alive, do I have 5 more minutes? To make it to make it more alive, I brought a practical example of Bregenz, the waterfront project, as a Creative Insight Council we did a couple of years ago. Bregenz tried to develop the harbor, and they did public participation, but in the wrong way. So it cost a lot of money, and there was a lot of resentment between the political parties, and it didn't solve the issue. So at that point we went to the mayor and said, if you ever want to do public participation again, we would offer for free to counsel you. And what we did not expect is as the mayor immediately said, yes, let's do something. I have a tricky issue. And the issue he had is, you see here now Bregenz from above. We have a famous festival at the lake. Here is the center of town. Here you see the train station. And if you look closer, you see that here the most precious, the most costly area in Bregenz is a parking lot since 30 years, because the politics could not decide what to do with this precious area. So they did nothing. And in the meantime, a group of investors came and said they want to make a new area. They want to develop this area. It's a 100 million euro project, and you can imagine that the mayor was concerned how to do it in a good way, so that it's commonly agreed in town what's happening there. So we suggested to do a Creative Insight Council. The planners were not really excited about that idea. At that time, they already worked for 2 years on a master plan, and fortunately the master plan was not yet decided upon. So it took the citizens 30 minutes to look at the plans and to discover what was wrong. And here you see the blue area is the area that will be developed. And if you look closer, you see that Bregenz, the biggest asset of Bregenz is that it's on a lake. But it's divided from the lake by the train and by the street. So what the citizens said is, this is the chance of a century to reconnect the town with the lake. And if you do this not now, when do you want to do it? And so we need a better connection to the lake. And the planners said, oh, what do you think? We considered this, and we are planning an underpath. And the citizens said, we are not interested in an underpath. What we want is something like Spanish stairs, something that is attractive, that's on the sunny side, where you can, in the evening, take a rest, you can sit there, see the sunset, you can carry the children car or the bicycle upon it, and they were so excited about their idea that they didn't go home when the Wisdom Council was over. What they did is they gathered and they started to build models, and they organized press conferences. They were so excited, and imagine, this is not an initiative against something. This is an initiative for something. This is positive. They want to improve the quality in their community. And it didn't take long that the politicians, the investors, the planners agreed and said, well, you're right, we should consider this. And in the end, they decided to make such a Spanish stairs in Bregenz, and hopefully next year they will be built. Actually, they should have started this year, but it's complicated with financing at the moment, so it's delayed a bit, but next year it should be built. And what we can learn out of this experience is that citizens are not substitutes for architects or planners or experts, but citizens have a very important knowledge that is not utilized yet. They are considered as an obstacle, as a disturbance, but actually they are a resource that should be used for the benefit of the whole community. So let's sum up. We are facing huge challenges as a society, and the big question is, how can we remain our capability to act? How can we turn clients and consumers into citizens? And I told you that self-organization is a very important part to achieve this. If you have slept the whole presentation, I would ask for your attention for the next 2 minutes, because I will sum it up in one graph. We are often concerned with problems, try to find solutions. If you can impose such solutions, do it. That's the most easiest way. So I don't advocate public participation in any case. But in many cases, you will not be able to find solutions or to implement solutions. And if this is the case, I would suggest that you look how to gain acceptance, how do you gain identification within the community. And we start with the point of responsibility. We should stop the blame game. We should stop to look for the one we can make responsible, but we should start ourselves with declaring ourselves as the one. We as citizens, we are responsible in the first hand. And what we have to learn is to trust each other, trustful cooperations. It's not enough to be engaged. We also have to cooperate. And on this basis, we can develop a shared vision. We don't have to agree on anything, on everything, but we have to have at least an idea of where we want to go together. And if this is the case, then we are able to implement solutions. So in general, you could say what we are facing at the moment is a big transition, a global transition from top-down controlled, steered systems to systems that are much more complex, where we cooperate and collaborate. And we need both. We cannot substitute hierarchy totally. Even in the future we will have hierarchy, but what we have not yet or not in that extent. What we need is cooperation, where we utilize the power of diversity. We are not aware of the way we are thinking because it's so common for us. But our way of thinking is very much influenced by the economical way to look at things. And the economical way to look at things focuses on deficits. It focuses on needs. It focuses on that what's missing. And the reason is why we do this is that because deficits are the demand on that we can develop products and services, and we can sell these services and products, and we can consume them. So this is an easy game. It's the basis for the growth of economies. It's the basis for the growth of institutions. Even if you're in a social institution, it's always the same game. We focus on what's missing, what's not working, on deficits. And interestingly, this never stops. The institutions grow bigger and bigger, demand grows bigger and bigger, and we are very creative to develop new products and new services. We're never content. And this is because we focus on deficits. And there is an overseen alternative. The overseen alternative is that actually we could also live in abundance if we were interested in abundance, in plentiness, in richness. But the richness cycle is completely different to the deficit cycle. The abundance cycle is a cycle where we don't focus on deficits but on strength, on gifts, on talents. We look at what are you capable of doing? And each person, each individual has a gift for the community. And I'm personally very concerned that I almost never meet young people who have passed the educational system. They have done studies, and almost none of them know about their gifts and strengths and abilities. That's not what they learn in school, at least in Austria. I don't know how it's in Sweden. And if you utilize strength and cooperate, you can create real abundance. And this is not about growth, it is about competent communities. And this is where the real tragedy is happening, because we are stuck in this cycle of deficit. And if we substitute the competence of communities with professional services, then we drain out the competence of the communities, and they get more and more dependent on professional services. And this is the situation we're in. We cannot afford this system in the long run. It's not working. But the good news is it's in our hands. It's in front of us. We just have to discover the strengths. And actually, this is also not a black and white game. I think it's wonderful to be creative, to collaborate, but sometimes you also want to hang out and drink a beer in front of the TV. But you need to find the right mixture. And currently we don't have this in balance. It's in imbalance. So I will skip the last thing. I've talked enough. Just one more hint. If you're interested in this whole philosophy, want to know more about, then Google Art of Hosting or go to the website artofhosting.org. This is an open source community worldwide trying to promote self-organization and conversations that matter. Not conversations about the usual stuff, but stuff that is really talking to our heart. So the benefits of such an approach is clear. We get better solution, higher acceptance, lower costs. The crucial question is, do we really want to cooperate? Is the time ripe that we want to work together and focus on strength, or are we still concerned with the growth of something we think is important? And this is the most important question I ask politicians if they want to cooperate with us. This is the crucial question. Are you ready for open-ended processes? Are you willing to accept what is emerging when you work with people, or do you already have in mind what has to come out? So I have two more things to say. There is a social capital conference at the end of this year in Gothenburg, and if you're interested in trustful cooperations, this would be an interesting event in Sweden you could attend. It's end of November, and there's a website, scwf12.wordpress.com, where you can get more information. And then I'm finished with my lecture. Maybe one more thing. You know this from cigarettes. Asking questions can result in thinking. So please take care. Thank you. We are part of the political system. We are working for politics and government, and we are experiencing that the traditional politics lose more and more acceptance and identification within the public. Therefore, this is the big political issue. How do we gain the support of the public? And in order to do that, it's not enough to have solutions. Actually, politicians even don't have the solutions anymore, because things are going to be so complex. And therefore, the important thing is that if we talk to politicians, we say, if you want to be successful, if you want to be re-elected, you will have to adopt new strategies, new ways to deal with the public. And the important point is to build up trust, mutual trust between society and the political system, because both have their concerns about the trustfulness of the other side. How to deal with the concerns of experts when you consult citizens in projects, and it is similar to the situation with the politics, that in the beginning they are not enthusiastic about involving the public. You are trained as an expert for years, maybe you have years of practical experience, and then ordinary citizens come, and it's natural to question if this is a good idea. But if you see it from another point of view, we have many examples in Austria, in Germany, where huge projects could not be realized, not because they were not planned properly, but because the public acceptance was not there. Therefore, I think it's a huge potential to save money and to save time if you let people participate properly. The biggest mistake that is usually done is that people are consulted after decisions are already made, after a project has crystallized itself already. I think the huge potential is, even before the planning process starts, to consult the public about their concerns, about their wishes, about what is important for them. And then I think it should be desirable for any planner to do such processes like Wisdom Council in advance of a planning process. Why is random selection important? We found out that random selection is maybe in the heart of all these processes. You cannot overestimate the importance of random selection. Usually you get stuck in a political debate because there are two groups in confrontation, in competition. And if you do the usual way to involve the public, you get the usual suspects who are probably not open-minded and have already made up their mind. What we intend is to have an open discussion. We have not made up our mind in a process, because the open-endedness of the process is the very important and beneficial thing. To be open-minded, it is very helpful to invite new people, not the usual suspects, not those you know already what they are going to say. And we know that a large proportion of the population is waiting to be asked to be involved. And this is a wonderful opportunity to get in touch with them. This does not mean that you exclude those you already have contacts. They can come in at a later part of the process. For example, when we have the Wisdom Council presenting its results, we invite all those associations and clubs, groups, to attend those meetings and discuss the results. Then they can bring in their wisdom, and so everything is fine.